we can fool ourselves, and in terms of the masking over of certain plot holes or lack of depth in certain areas or lack of depth of ideas, that you can only experience when either someone else points them out to you or you're forced to recognize in the articulation to someone else. So that's such an important skill, and it's the skill I probably admire the most in other people, is an ability to tell me an idea, or you paint their vision in a way that inspires me to get involved. Like, I think that's, if not the most important skill, in modern times, it's up there, I think.
Fraser, so great to meet you here on Zoom.
Pleasure to meet you too, Petra. I know this has been, we went to do this a while ago, and then I had to reschedule, so it's nice to finally be able to catch up with you.
Yeah, everything happens at the right time.
True. Yeah. Is that your life philosophy?
Yes. I've learned that, and it helps me sometimes when things doesn't, if it doesn't work out, then I just think, okay, well, maybe it's not the right time now for it. Yeah.
That's quite a healthy attitude, I think.
Yeah, but it comes with age as well. I think when you're in your 20s, you don't want to accept it, but the older you get, the more you see patterns, and then you see, okay, well, this didn't work out, and then later it did, or it just wasn't meant to be. So I think that makes it then easier to overcome disappointments. But Fraser, you're a filmmaker, and you've got this wonderful company, Stamp. And now we have to start. Where did filmmaking start for you?
Well, I should start by saying Stamp is not my company. I just work for it.
Okay.
Stamp is owned by my boss, Ben. But I've worked here now for just over 2 years. But where did filmmaking start for me? I got into it really by accident, which it was just funny you mentioned the everything happens at the right time, because that's sort of what happened to me, really. I didn't have a grand plan to get into this line of work whatsoever. I went to university in 2016, and I went to study English because I didn't really have any inclination about what I did want to do for work.
Okay.
And that was my best subject at school, and I thought, if nothing else, it will show people that I can read and write. But I basically spent the 3 years of my university degree playing rugby, spending time with my rugby mates, socializing with my rugby mates.
Yeah, it was a type of a diversion.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, studying was always secondary to my rugby commitments throughout university. But I enjoyed myself, and I'm glad I spent the time doing that. But then it sort of got to two things kind of coincided at the same time. One of them was I reached my third year of university, and that's when everyone starts having at least in this country, the third year is your final year, when all the conversations around careers, next steps, all of those conversations start to come to the fore. And I was struck by the fact that I hadn't actually really considered what I was going to do when I left university. I was just kind of banking on the fact that someone must employ me. I've got a degree now. And I wasn't really taken by any of the typical jobs that an English literature student would classically have gone into, whether that's teaching or publishing or journalism, any of those things. So I had that, on my mind. And then at the same time, I had 2 quite severe, nasty knee injuries playing rugby, which kind of ruled out my prospective rugby career. Not that I was in any way going to make a career out of it, but it sort of consumed a lot of my life until that point. And then I discovered I was no longer able to play. So
it's
I felt a bit.
Injury is always, I think, like a standstill. Like sort of now you have to reflect.
Exactly. That's a really nice way of framing it. It's almost like you've had your head down just enjoying yourself without ever really taking a look up at, about, and considering what direction you're going in, what benefit are you getting from this. I was just having such fun at the time that it was not a consideration for me. So I felt a bit lost, like I was a little bit depressed at the time. Like I felt like I was kind of lacking identity in that sense, as sort of dramatic as that sounds, considering I wasn't, by no stretch a professional rugby player or anything. I was a social rugby player and, just did it out of the enjoyment of it. But I felt that without that, I felt a little bit, like I was lacking some sort of character trait that I felt was central to me. So with that in mind, I basically needed an excuse to continue spending time with all of my rugby mates and going on the away buses. And obviously I lived with all these guys. So I thought I need a way to justify my involvement to keep spending time with these guys, even though I can't play. So when I was a kid, I used to love watching sports documentaries. Like I used to love watching, seeing what people were actually like away from the cameras, like away from the classical media, seeing what guys are like in the changing rooms just before they've got to run out and put their body on the line, or seeing what these guys do for fun outside of sport, seeing what drives these guys. Is it family? Is it ambition to be the best? Is it any of the above, really? And I just loved all of that, all of the unseen bits, really, of what sports documentaries gave you.
Yeah, I can so relate to that because this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's so in anything, like when especially now that media is so accessible and so many things have become media-ified, everything sort of starts to become a bit showy. And I felt that what was really interesting about a lot of things, but especially sport, was the real people and the real stories behind what you watch on TV. So I used to love watching those things growing up. And I kind of thought, well, now that I'm in a position where I can't involve myself in the sport physically, why don't I try and make something similar in terms of a sports documentary, just about my mates and about our club and about our history and the story of the guys in my team. So my dad helped me buy a really cheap DSLR camera at the time. I think it was like a £300 camera, one lens. I bought myself a little lapel mic, and I just basically, with no understanding of how to structure a film or what frame rates were, or
amazing. I love it.
How to interview someone, and any of that. It was like zero knowledge. I was like, I'll have a crack. I'll make do. So I was doing things like interviewing. I would like interview my friends, but because I didn't have a tripod, I'd have to like stand to the side so they weren't looking at me, and just say, I'm going to ask you questions, and you just look at the wall and answer as if you're speaking to someone who's interviewing you, just because I didn't have enough equipment, basically. So I just set about making this documentary. And we had quite a compelling story as a club. We'd been through some sort of controversy with regards to the student union at the time, and we'd just come off the back of a first varsity loss in 7 or 8 years. So it was quite an interesting narrative. And the film, I mean, looking back, the film is, technically speaking, dreadful, but quite sentimental for me, and I think will sort of contains a lot of good memories that will live on for me and my friends and everyone that was involved.
This is what you play rugby for. This is why you pay your membership. This is why we wake up early. This is why we go into training. This is why we beat each other up for 80 minutes.
The days where you go away and you will take these all the way through to being an old man. You'll tell your children and your grandchildren about it.
I will crawl off this pitch for you boys today. Yeah. All I'm asking is that you boys do the exact same. Switch on! You've been here before last year, boys. Let's not let it slip away and happen again.
You've got something in this team that's really special. You've got a closeness and a spirit to work for each other that's exceptional.
You only get 3 years of these games, and then it's gone.
Technically, it had to be what it is, because from there on you developed. So for you it might be that way, but for somebody who sees it, it wouldn't be.
Possibly, yeah. There's probably an element of me being more critical of it with new knowledge, like looking back on it through fresh eyes. But I still think at the time, like when I made it, I think the reason I draw attention to how technically terrible it is because at the time I thought it was the bee's knees. I was like, where's Sky Sports going to sign this guy up? This guy, I'm incredible at this. But looking back, I thought it was just sort of the naivety gets you a long way. I think in like that sort of unfounded confidence in something that you don't necessarily deserve yet, actually sort of counterintuitively counts in your favor. I think at the start of any pursuit of a new skill, you need a bit of confidence.
No, absolutely. I think so. And I think even with anything, I mean, even if you take musicians, when the first thing that they play or the first music that they play, of course, it's not going to be the same but you need that to help you to improve or to go to the next step. And so, but sorry, I interrupted you. You wanted to say, what did the university think of your documentary then?
So at the time, it was mixed signals that I got from the university. So initially, we as a club struggled a little bit with our, let's say, our relationship with the university authorities, as it were. So the student union, the department that managed all of the sports teams. We had a kind of hot and cold relationship with them. We always thought we were maybe treated a little bit more harshly because rugby as a sport, especially in university settings, kind of inherits this reputation a lot of the time that I didn't think was fair. But at the same time, they were really keen on us doing our own promotion of the sports club, be it through social media, be it through films, be it through photos. So they were kind of encouraging it from that perspective. But what they didn't like about the film was it was just raw. There was swearing. There was, we're seeing what guys say to each other just before they run out onto the pitch. So there's a lot of unsavory language goes on in the rugby environment, young male rugby environments, which is, to anyone that is involved in those sports, it's just a given. But I think the university was worried that it would reflect badly on the university. So out of courtesy, I invited them to the first screening. So I booked out the biggest lecture theatre on campus. I invited all the guys from the club, all the friends I had from other clubs, people from my course, girlfriends, etc. All of that. And I invited the university, the guys in that department, to come and watch the film. And they tried to veto the screening before. After seeing my invite, they initially tried to veto the screening because they were worried about the reputational damage it could do to the university. But I just sort of ardently pushed on and did it anyway. And it went down really well. And we got I got some great feedback. We got lots of messages from people who had no actual involvement with the club up until that point, who'd messaged me and said it's changed my perspective on you guys, and I think it's made me see that you guys are actually a bunch of nice, passionate guys who, just do this sport because it brings you all together and you love it, not because you enjoy what are seen as the negative sides of big male sports clubs on campus, that sort of boisterous attitude. It's like, we realize now that you guys aren't doing it for that. You guys are doing it because you actually love spending time with each other and you love getting out there and getting a bit muddy. And so it was good. And then off the back of that, the university then approached me with a little bit of money and said, can you do something similar or do something smaller scale, but do some promotional material for the other sports clubs on campus?
Wow.
I thought, it was like pennies really in terms of the amount of work that it was going to take to do it. But at the time I was thinking, people are going to pay me to do this. I would have done that anyway. Even if they'd have given me no money, I'd have said, yeah, I'd love to do that. So I thought it just sort of opened my eyes to maybe there's money maybe this could be a potential income earner, if not, not at that point, it was not this could be a career. It was I could get a bit of pocket money out of doing what I enjoy doing anyway. So I just, followed that. I invested in a bit more equipment, made some more films, worked with some small businesses, got some more equipment, made some more films, and then just sort of blagged my way through the first couple of years and into my first job. And then just sort of took it from there, basically. So it was a very sort of fortunate circumstance for me in terms of the timing of the injury and the realization that, well, I could get a camera and I could just do this, and the timing just seemed to work out. But I was very fortunate.
Yeah, and you were part of the team, so you knew, you could get in there. Not many people can get into the locker rooms or the behind the scenes, but you were there, and of course they trusted you then filming them and interviewing them, because I think if somebody comes from the outside suddenly, and there must be a sort of a reservation.
Absolutely, and also a reservation from being themselves, and also maybe a manipulation of how they appear on camera versus what they would have done had there not been a crew in there. So yeah, you're right in that I was in a unique position to have already built up that rapport for the last 2.5 years, and not needing to then regain the trust. It did make it a bit strange though, because I'm then having to put on my objective filmmaker hat, and asking these guys personal questions and asking them things that you wouldn't necessarily ask them over a beer after a game. Asking them, so what is it about the sport of rugby that you love, but like in quite a serious way. So it's all there's a little bit of a front going on with us both when I'm actually speaking to them on camera, because they know that I'm doing this to make a film, not necessarily because we would have talked about this anyway, if you see what I mean.
Oh yeah.
But it was good, and the guys did really well as well. It's a lot to ask of, late teenage, early 20s guys who've never spoken on camera before to open up and speak to me about personal things, about their relationship to rugby, about their relationship to their friends. And I was like, really, it's only since doing this job for a number of years now and interviewing hundreds of people that I get more and more impressed every time I watch those interviews back about just how composed and articulate those guys were in that environment, considering what an amateurish setup the whole experience must have been for them.
Yeah, and it's not easy. Camera, I think, can be very intimidating, and I feel it. I photograph people, but the moment somebody wants to photograph me, I feel that you suddenly think, hey, but really it's intimidating. So and then also the interviews, so that's also another thing where you ask people about things that they not normally think about, or that they've never been asked before, and then they have to go and delve in a little bit and find the answers.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think I often joke with people that I'm interviewing these days, and they say, oh, I'm terrible in front of camera. I don't like when they got a big light in my face and the cameras just make me nervous. And I'm like, hey, why do you think I got a job doing this? It's so I never have to do that.
No, that's true. But promoting, because you seem to have the confidence also to promote your first film, getting all the people together, doing the screening. So is that for you, does that come easy?
It's funny, I think at the time it did come easily. Like at the time when I was 20, 21, however old I was when I released that, it did feel quite easy, and more so it was that naive confidence of, I think I've made something really special here. I'd love for people to see this and everyone to share in it, rather than a kind of it was like unfounded confidence, really. So I did find it easy. But you know the Dunning-Kruger graph. Are you aware of that as a concept?
No.
So once you learn this, you will see this everywhere, in every field, in every specialty, in every person you meet. Whenever you yourself learn something new, you'll track yourself along this graph. So if you imagine an XY axis, obviously I'm aware I'm watching myself, and this might be in reverse, but anyway, so you imagine an XY axis, and on the X axis is knowledge. Oh, I've forgotten what the axes are now. Basically, the chart goes, when you learn a little bit about something, your confidence in how well you know it and how much you know skyrockets. So when you learn the first 5% of a new skill, the confidence you have that you are really capable in this field shoots right to the top. You're never going to be as confident as when you just learned how to do something really basic, like put some clips together and put some music over it in my case. And I was thinking, God, this filmmaking, maybe I'm a natural. Maybe this is my calling.
Yeah.
And then you quickly fall into what's called the valley of is it the valley of modesty or something like that. I think that's how it's framed in the graph. But essentially, you then start to realize how much there is you don't know. So the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn, and you fall in the valley of humility. That's what it's called. So you kind of you then on this graph you catapult yourself down into really low confidence, because you're aware, you've seen how good some people are at this and how advanced other people in your field are. The more you immerse yourself in that world. And it's not until you've spent years and years and years in that valley of humility that you eventually build up the kind of requisite knowledge to come out of the other side and regain that confidence you had at the very start. So I think at the time I found it really easy to promote and talk to my friends about it and shout about the fact I was making it, because I knew so little that I thought I knew pretty much everything. So I was super high on confidence, and then I'm probably somewhere along that valley now where the self-promoting confidence doesn't come as naturally. I try and bring it out because I know it has general benefits, but I'm aware now of just how talented some people are and how competent other people are in my case in filmmaking, that I'm conscious of not coming across as if I think I know more than I do, because I know how much there is I still don't know.
But don't you think everybody's in that valley? Because you think it looks on the outside, it looks as if everybody's figured it out, and but you know that everybody's in that space. Or most
somewhere,
people,
I think so.
Most people are there. But I find also you need that time and it comes back to your injury as well. Sometimes you need that time to also reflect on what it is that you really want to do, because somehow when you start, I found it with photography as well. You see what other people are doing. You think, okay, but I want to do that too, but you don't find the thing that really makes you excited, that you start doing things and you think you're supposed to do it, but when you are in that slow period, or that period, like you say, in that down period, where you then realize, okay, but this is not me, this is not how I want to do it, and you find then your flow.
No, that's so true. And I think there's always one's perception of what life would be like doing something will never align with what it's actually like, whether it's better or worse. But a lot of the time it is, you think you will really enjoy something, and a lot of the time you won't. I've been, as I say, very fortunate to have sort of fallen into a career that I really like straight away. And I haven't necessarily had to go through the kind of, not dead end job, but through the kind of I'm just doing this job to get paid phase. I kind of just through circumstance and being very fortunate skipped that bit of my career out. So I perhaps don't know that so well, but I'm aware that there's a lot of the time when you start a new skill, pursue a new career, pick up a new hobby, that in all likelihood the inspiration that it took you to pursue it in the first place might not align. That enthusiasm might not join you when in the actual act of doing it.
So you focus on interviewing and telling the story behind the scenes, basically.
I think so. It's not just the interviewing and the behind the scenes. I think initially that was my hook into the industry, was documentaries unearthing real stories that were already happening. But I think that as I've grown in this job and been exposed to different kinds of storytelling and different kinds of projects and video projects, it's more about storytelling more generally. So sometimes it does take the format of sitting down and interviewing someone. A lot of what I do is speaking to real people, whether that's from a business perspective, whether that's from a sports perspective, trying to uncover real stories. But a lot of it is trying to actually craft stories on behalf of brands that might not follow that sit down talking head interview format and might be more abstract or more creative maybe.
Because it's interesting that we tend to gravitate to stories, and even brands, when they start, when that's the sort of marketing strategy to tell the story of the brand or to give that sort of impression, then people are more drawn to it.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's I wish I could recite them to you, but there are some phenomenal statistics about information retention when it comes to receiving information through story. So there's studies where they list off a number of facts to participants in this study and then ask them to recite them later. And then they do the same thing as a control group, and they do the same thing to a second group, but wrap all of these facts within a story that's got a beginning, middle, and end, and follows a classic story structure. And the information retention is exponentially greater when received in a story. So the reason that there's a big focus for brands on good storytelling, I'm reluctant sometimes to use the word storytelling because it's been kind of ambushed by the market, and storytelling is the new branding. Everyone's a storyteller, and story is, we tell stories by blah blah blah, insert X agency name here. Everyone says it, right? But fundamentally, when you go back to the root definition, that is what makes people retain information better, but more importantly or more impactfully builds trust and garners like a real emotional response from an audience, which you just don't get from purely informative or purely educational content. Sometimes you need, if your goal as a brand is to position yourself in the hearts and minds of a group, you need to find a way to connect with them on a human level. And really the only way to do that is through proper thought out storytelling.
But in the film industry and filmmaking, you collaborate a lot. You work in teams together, and how do you find that? Because you started off doing it alone, and how do you work now in groups together or collaborate together?
That's a really good question, because that is a constant battle of mine, is to give up power of certain elements of a project, like as you say. And I think I'm not alone in the getting into video content and filmmaking as an industry. Lots of people these days, because of the accessibility people have to high quality cameras and sound equipment, that people can go out with not a lot of money and make a film that's got good editing and good quality video and good audio. So everyone is used to having a broad set of disciplines going into it. Whereas in years gone by, when cameras were seriously expensive, you probably went into the industry under a certain domain or with a certain discipline, or specializing in a certain discipline. So you went in as an assistant producer, or you went in as a sound engineer, or similar, or you went in as a gaffer, and whatever that was. So I think it's been a learning curve for me, definitely, is that being able to work within a team of specialists who know more about their domain than I do, and being able to, one, delegate, but two, take on board advice. I think when I first started this job, that was one of my weaker skills, was taking on constructive creative criticism, to use some alliteration. I think it was like, so I struggled with that a little bit, and I've gotten better. I feel as though I've got better at it, just by trial and error, and seeing the results of how far kind of creative humility gets you. Because lots of people, ideas are, everyone's got ideas, and lots of people have good ideas, and it's not necessarily the most experienced head in the room that's got the best ideas. So we are working with it. But I think it's more rewarding that working in a team. I still take on solo projects, and I love that. I love having complete creative control over a project and being able to execute a vision in my head as I see it. But as I get a bit older, I just find the payoff when you win as a team, or when you create something special as a team, to just be far more rewarding than any individual act of creativity or filmmaking.
Yeah, because I think also I've recently spoke to a choreographer and also a composer, and you think they have the idea, or they have the, you know, she had the music in her head, and she goes and she writes the music and gives it to the orchestra, and of course they have their own interpretation of it, and the same with a choreographer. But in, like you are saying now, if you work together and you have to collaborate, you have to give away some of this, these ideas. You have to give away to make this film or to make this project. And yeah, I can imagine that it's that's something that you have to learn to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a real skill, is being able to articulate a vision in your head and do it in a way that inspires loyalty or enthusiasm to the idea. I think you can get away a lot of the time with lazy thinking when you're the only one you're having to convince of the merits of something.
Yeah.
So if you've got an idea and you've got a rough vision in your head, you can be kind of creatively lazy and not try and articulate it to someone else, because it can be intimidating to do so, and also you don't think it's worth your time. I'll sort this out. I will get it to look how I want and sound how I want, and I know the vision. But often it's in that articulation process, it's in being forced to write or speak an idea out loud to another person, that forces you to see holes in your original vision. Like, a lot of your thoughts are so fluid, not you personally, obviously, a lot of one's thoughts are so fluid that we can fool ourselves, and in terms of the masking over of certain plot holes or lack of depth in certain areas or lack of depth of ideas, that you can only experience when either someone else points them out to you or you're forced to recognize in the articulation to someone else. So that's such an important skill, and it's the skill I probably admire the most in other people, is an ability to tell me an idea, you know, or you paint their vision in a way that inspires me to get involved. Like, I think that's, if not the most important skill, this, you know, in modern times, it's up there, I think.
Yeah, I think just yesterday I spoke to this choreographer, and he said the same thing, you know, that you have to really put yourself into, he has to put himself into the dancer's position to be able to communicate what he wants, you know. So there's this, you have to have that connection with that person.
Absolutely.
But now, your ideas, how do you come up with ideas, or what is the thing that would inspire you to make a film?
I think they come from lots of different places. I try and keep a log, or like an ongoing running set of notes. It's on my phone, for when ideas strike. That's one thing I've learned, is that when ideas strike, write them down, because it just get into the habit. And I've tried to get into the habit of writing down ideas when they hit me, because if I don't, sometimes you're in that position where you remember you had an idea, but you can't remember what it is, which is frustrating. But 99% of the time, you don't even remember that you had that idea. You had that idea, it came and went, and it's not until a year later, when it hits you again, or you're in the same room and you're reminded of it, that you realize you've just had a year wasted that you could have spent working on that idea or executing on that film, for instance. So I don't really have a kind of creative process, as it were. I think that's what makes creativity interesting and intriguing, is that it's not a case of formalizing the process to a point where you can guarantee sitting down in a certain space with certain music on, having had a certain drink, that creativity will flow. You can obviously maximize the chances of creativity, but really what makes it special is the unorthodox nature where ideas come from. Ideas can strike you. Like, people joke all the time that the best ideas hit you in the shower, and it's true, not because there is something. It's not because there's something routine based about the shower that facilitates ideas. It's the lack of routine. It's the lack of formalizing, right, I'm in my thinking space now. It's because people are in the shower, they're washing, their mind is given the freedom to just go down avenues that it might not do when you are looking at your phone screen, or you're at work, or you're talking to someone else. Your brain just has free reign. So I think just giving yourself enough moments throughout the day where your brain is able to just follow ideas wherever they may lead, and sometimes they'll lead nowhere, but when they do lead somewhere, write them down.
Yeah, I always thought it was the water that makes me get these ideas or realizations sometimes when I'm in the shower. 11 o'clock at night, then I get this brilliant idea and I want to do it. But I thought it was the water. But it's true. It's because there's no routine. There's nothing that that takes your attention really in that space.
I think there's an expectation as well, and I think that as a concept is probably not very widely understood, especially on, a lot of the work I do is kind of with brands and businesses, and I feel as though there's a kind of assumption that creativity is a muscle that can be turned on or off, or flexed on or off at certain points. So, the first time you hear about a project, for instance, you get a brief through the door. We've got a campaign that's going to promote this. It's going to happen here. We've got this much time to do it. Here are some things we want to emphasize as part of this campaign. Go. As if that creative process of coming up with a unique way of telling that story will just land in that room, land in the meeting. Really, what I found, certainly personally, in terms of my process, and the best ideas I've ever had have come from when I've had that initial fact-finding meeting previously, and I've just let those ideas simmer. Like I've just let those ideas just bleed through my brain for a few weeks, and I will draw a parallel with those ideas that have been simmering in my brain and something completely unrelated in my life. Work, could be work, could be outside of work, and it will click that is a great way to frame the problem that this customer of theirs is having, or the talent that this company has available to them. This is a great way to bring that story to life. And then you go back and you have that second meeting again where you pitch a creative idea. The longer you can have in between those, or at least them not being the same meeting, not having the briefing meeting and the creative execution plan meeting at the same time, is so valuable, because you actually give yourself space to let ideas percolate and you come up with something better than what you can string together in the room, which might be nonsense, you might not have had the requisite time to come up with what you actually think. You're just kind of reacting in the moment to what you feel they want to hear, or whatever your gut feeling is about it, which could well be misguided.
They say that life is always easier after you let yourself come on. I'm in the shadow of the sun, where I belong. There's something coming on. I'm in the shadow of the sun. Oh, and I need you. I'm in the shadow of the sun. Oh, and I need you.
But do you sometimes go and tap into, say, the history of filmmaking, or filmmakers, how they did it, or how they progressed? Do you find that also in the technical side of things inspirational, or do you just go with what you learn and go back to what you've done?
It's a balance, I think. I think there's a lot you can. if you spend too much time consuming stuff from other people, you end up becoming a sort of law of average of what other people have done, and you'll never really push the boundaries, because you'll sort of be a diluted version of the content you consume. Obviously, taking inspiration from people is great, whether that's ideas for shots, ideas for colors, ideas for story, ideas for formats. That can be great. And I've got a running log of that as well in my notes. If I see a reference, whether it's a TV advert, whether it's an Instagram reel, whether it's a poster, whether it's a quote soundbite from an interview, I'll write it down and try and find a filing for it that makes sense and in a way that, that might be useful to me down the line. But I think it's important to lean on what your own creative instincts are, because that's ultimately what's going to make you different and therefore hopefully make you valuable.
Yeah, that's true. And and authentic also, because then it's your work, it's what you do. But the industry is, like you said before, it's everybody can afford a camera, and I've heard of a filmmaker who did a documentary over 15 years, and most of it she did with her phone, with her iPhone. So the industry is not, it's not difficult to make films, but it's also difficult to get the work because everybody's doing it now. So how do you see it? You work with a company now, but as a freelancer, do you think it's possible to really have a career in filmmaking?
Definitely, I think so. But it will require an adaptation to the new age, I think. Camera equipment and sound equipment and high quality equipment in general is so accessible now that if all that was differentiating you initially from the next person who had an idea was that you had the money to invest in the equipment to execute it, then your time is short-lived. But if you can have a relevant point of differentiation as a freelance, it goes for both, right? It goes for it with your freelancing or your production company agency. If you can if you have a valuable point of difference that you can bring to the market, then you will not struggle. You should not struggle for work. The difficulty is working out what is that going to look like for you? Like, what is that point of differentiation? That point of differentiation could be you are an expert in producing this very specific kind of graphic element. So you could be a VFX person, right? You could specialize in doing the cartoon style of animation that is becoming quite popular nowadays. You could be discipline specialized, or you could specialize in helping a very particular kind of client. So if you work with, if you find yourself working a lot with the same kind of business or the same kind of brand or the same kind of athlete or the same kind of influencer, if you can start to spot parallels and common challenges that are faced by all of those people, and you can come up with a unique, or if not unique, at least a differentiated way of approaching those problems that you can bring to market, and you can demonstrate that you've helped people like that solve problems like this before, then even if you're on a surface level, your skill set is not necessarily any more advanced than the rest of the market, your ideal client is more likely to place their trust in you because they know that you help them do this. You're not a generalist who can make a film about anything for anyone. You specialize in doing, whatever that niche is. Obviously, that's just niching in general. But I think specific to filmmaking and video production, it's about trying to work out what the relevant differentiation is between you and other people, or between your clients' challenges and other clients' challenges.
Well, I can drive off like a granny, or I can just send it.
Oh, I saw the clip. Have you seen the BTS?
The premise of this shoot is to teach Max Verstappen how to drift drive.
I've been the most nervous in the last 1 or 2 years.
Do some donuts. We'll do some figure of eights.
Hold it.
So you got one chance. Fast enough for you?
I think it's not too bad.
Enter frame, a donut, and then exit.
We understand the ambition, the expectation.
So that Red Bull can continue leading the way in their content.
Never stop challenging, never stop entertaining.
Do you think people understand the value of what it entails to make a film? You know, that people tend to think, oh, well, you know, you're just filming, but they don't understand the editing that goes in behind the scenes and, you know, all the logistics around it, you know, that people are not willing to pay for it.
Of course, and there will always be people who think like that about everything. There is video production is probably unique in the fact that there are quite a lot of stages to it, and it can be quite complex and time consuming and expensive as an art form, as a medium. But I don't think it's necessarily on. Like I see a lot of moaning about that on LinkedIn from fellow video production folks. Clients don't understand how expensive this is and how long things take. And I think to a certain extent that's true, and that's a valid gripe. But I think the onus is really on the production company not to say you need to pay us all of this because look how much work has gone into this, but rather here's how much value there is for you and your business because of the work we do. That's why it costs this much. Because you could be taking too long. You could be making an overly complex production process for a certain kind of project that might not actually be any more benefit to the client than you having done the same thing a third of the time. So to say to the client, you don't understand how long this took, you're not valuing our work enough. It's not on the client to decide how you arrange your time. It's on you as the freelancer, or you as probably more so the production company or the agency, to demonstrate to them that the value of what you're doing for them greatly exceeds the price that you're charging, whether it took you a long time or not. That's my take on it, at least.
That's a brilliant way to look at it, and to sort of work with it. You know, that it is true. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but hey, wonderful. I like it. But tell me, Fraser, I have to ask you about, you wrote to me that you were busy at the time with the South African rugby team doing interviews. I want to know more about this project of yours.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool one, actually.
I can imagine.
So years ago now, so one of the first films I did after that university film we spoke about was a short documentary with the Northampton Saints rugby team, which was at the time my local Premiership rugby team. I knew one of the players there through a friend from school, and I kind of had an in, and then it was just a passion project for me, right? I wasn't paid or anything like that. But in that process, I met a guy called Cobus Reinach, who was at the time the Northampton Saints scrum half, and also the Springbok scrum half. I just kind of met him in passing, and we followed each other on Instagram, and that was about it, basically. And that was when, as I say, I was very amateurish and had really no idea what I was doing, but I had a lot of unfounded confidence and passion about making films and documentaries and whatever. So whenever this was maybe a month or two ago, I got a message from him on Instagram, having not heard from him in about 4 years, and said, "Hi Fraser, I'm just speaking with the guys who are making Chasing the Sun 2. And for anyone that is not aware, Chasing the Sun 1 was the 6-part documentary that followed the story of the winning Springboks team at the World Cup in Japan in 2019.
Oh, okay.
And when it came out, it absolutely blew the hats off everyone in the sporting documentary space. It was really well shot, really high quality storytelling, really emotive. And I think to this day is still the highest rated documentary on the whole of IMDb. So it's a big deal. And I remember watching it as a fan at university in 2019 when it came out. And he said, yeah, these guys, they're making a sequel, because obviously they won the World Cup in 2023 as well. They're making a sequel to this. They've got all of this footage from the World Cup itself, and they're looking to string this together using present day retrospective interviews from the players. And Kobus was in a funny position. I believe the story was all of the other players they wanted to interview were back in South Africa at the time, and could therefore easily be interviewed by the local crew that was already employed. But Kobus, because he now plays in Montpellier in France, was kind of stranded in France, and basically it wasn't cost efficient for the company to send a whole production crew to France to film it. So he said, look, is there any way we can? They've said, look, we'd love you to be in the film, but we can't shoot it ourselves. Do you know anyone that can do it for you? And so I got a message from Kobus saying, hey, I've told these guys that you'll be able to do this. Can you help me out? I was like, yeah, absolutely, I can help you out. So initially we were working out so it was really cool. And for me, as I'm first and foremost just a rugby fan and a Kobus fan. So I was like, this is really cool, I can get to. And then it went from really excitement to a bit daunting, going, I've got to really shoot this interview for what is going to be a sequel to one of the best documentaries ever. I've got to pull my finger out and actually work out how we're going to do this. So I spoke to my boss, Ben, about logistically how difficult would it be to get because it was quite a complicated setup they wanted. It wasn't as simple as, put a light up and put a camera on, start recording. They had, like a 10-piece lighting setup and a backdrop. And it was what they wanted was very specific in terms of to match the style of the stuff they'd already shot.
Of course.
So we were with it logistically, how feasible is it to transfer all of this kit down to Montpellier in the south of France to film him at the Montpellier ground, for instance, in the changing rooms or something? And we basically came to the conclusion that it was going to be carnage doing that. Since Brexit, getting kit, like heavy, big film equipment across from the UK to France is just a bit of a pain. Flying would be a pain. So we basically said to Kobus, look, this is going to be, if we're going to do this in Montpellier, it's going to be really expensive for either whoever's paying for this, whether it's the production company that's hiring us, whatever, it's going to be expensive. It probably makes more sense if you can fly to us and we'll film it here in our studio. We can set it up in the day. You can just fly over in and out in a few hours. And he said, okay, brilliant. So he got a flight the next day, like Wednesday evening, flew out. We recorded him late at night in our studio, and then he flew back first thing the next day.
How amazing.
So it was all the whole thing happened in like 72 hours basically. And it was just very fortunate. I was meant to be skiing at that time, but I'd cancelled my ski holiday, and then fortuitously got the message like 2 days later that, oh, hey, by the way, can we shoot Chasing the Sun too? I thought, yes, we can.
There's the timing thing. There's the timing thing again.
There you go, exactly.
You see.
The legacy of South Africa and the Springboks is unity and hope. Hope for South Africa that our kids will inherit. A hope that the ones following us in the jersey next will not just chase us, but they will completely eclipse us. That's our legacy.
Wow, this is amazing. And just shows you after 4 years, he still remembered you. So you made an impact on him.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is just, to be honest, I don't think I really left much of an impression on him at the time. It was a very in passing hello. I think I maybe had one conversation with him, but because we followed each other on Instagram.
Oh yeah, so he knew what you were doing.
He knew what I was doing, and his wife and I follow each other on Instagram as well, because she had commented on that first film I made 4 years ago for the Saints. His wife sent me a really nice message about she enjoyed the film. So I'd been in contact just through back and forth following, and just kind of a lot of it just staying front of mind. So it was very fortunate that he thought of us, he thought of me and thought of us when he needed that.
But how amazing is social media? I just think social media is such a great tool for people to connect with each other. I know sometimes people have very negative things to say, but for me, social media is amazing. I've, met the most wonderful people on there and see what people are doing, and it's really inspiring for me. So, I love these stories when you think social media had something to do with it.
Yeah, it gets a lot of bad press as well, social media. Deservedly, I think it does get a lot of bad press. But I think if you can look past all the negatives and focus on the what it unlocks for people in terms of being able to actually stay connected with people you care about, is when used in the right way, so valuable.
I just think you have the freedom to follow whoever you want. So if you choose to follow inspirational people, then those are the people that come on your way. So it's really
I think there is something
choice.
to be said for that. What I don't like about social media, this is not related at all, but what I don't like about social media is this move toward a kind of, regardless of who you've opted in, voluntarily to follow, we're going to show you kind of algorithmically driven content that we just think is going to keep you hooked on the screen. So you can't, there's no option anymore on any of the social media to go, I only want to see new posts from people I've elected to follow. Now you go on Instagram and it's bam, 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 bam. Here's 100 million short videos that are designed to just, keep you addicted to your phone. And like, I think if you can find a way to sort of circumnavigate that a bit, then you can have a better experience with social media, but it can be quite difficult sometimes.
That's true. And I mean, obviously people who pay for advertising, they are thrown in your face. But then again, sometimes some of these people I discover or I find, and then I'm happy that I found them, and I'm happy that ad came on my feed. So I think it's like you say, it's a positive and a negative about it. But I have to ask you, Fraser, what are still the wishes for you?
What are still the wishes for me? I think continuing to make about things that I care about, like regardless of how. Obviously, I do a lot of the stuff I do is client work, and I love it. But I think always making room for projects that I do only for the love of it will help kind of maintain that the love of it, so it doesn't just become work, and I can kind of retain that passion around the subject. I think always making time for passion projects and voluntary films. At the minute, it's a film I'm following a UFC fighter, so an MMA athlete from the UK. She was shooting a documentary about his quite interesting story in the lead up to a fight he's got at the end of the summer.
Amazing.
So my goal at the minute is to make that as good as possible, and then find some way of getting it out there in the world.
And then in mostly sport, you're mostly interested in sport documentaries?
I think at the minute, that's kind of my biggest, I'd say that's what I'm most passionate about. But I do a lot of more what you'd classify as more corporate jobs, more commercial jobs than that. My day-to-day is much more corporate than that. But I don't really mind that. I don't see that as a particularly negative. I actually quite like the opportunity that corporate work gives you to make otherwise dry sounding topics and campaigns interesting in the way that you frame the story visually. So I actually quite like that. I quite like not only sexy sports documentaries. I quite like when a job comes in that on the surface of it sounds like it could be not very exciting, and then working with the client to find out what's the best way to tell that story, what is important to the viewer of this story that we can draw attention to using all of the equipment and creativity in our arsenal.
The fact that you do these projects yourself, do you think that also has an influence on how you do the commercial work?
I think yes, actually, yeah, very much so. I wrote a post on LinkedIn not long ago about the importance of spec work, i.e. unpaid do for your own love of your craft. Often spec work is done, you make a mock campaign for a bigger brand in the hope that they see it, and then when they have the next campaign, they'll hire you to do it. Obviously, that is one kind of spec work. But the other kind is just, you make a documentary because you want to kind of flex your documentary making skills. And I think what's really good about that environment, whether you do it in either of those ways, is that you remove the pressure of expectation from a client who you know is paying you money to make something like this. And if it doesn't work out exactly how it happens in their mind and you don't have a great relationship with them, it might spoil the fun of making it. So it gives you a chance to be free of pressure and expectation. And also, because you're free of pressure and expectation, gives you the room and the environment to test new skills that you perhaps wouldn't have the time, budget, or confidence to do on the time of the client. So if there's a cool there's a cool shot you've seen in a film, there's a creative way of mounting a camera on a car, whatever that is, you might be reluctant to try that for the first time when a client is paying you to do it because you don't know what you don't know, right? There will be challenges associated with lots of cooler aspects of filmmaking that you just won't know until you try it. So spec work and passion projects in general give you the freedom to test certain equipment, certain types of shooting, certain editing styles in your own time. And then if and when they work, or you perfect them to the point that you're happy enough to offer it to a client, you can then work on client work with confidence that they're going to like what they see, because you've already encountered all of those challenges before in your own time. So I think it does help my client work, I think, doing passion projects, definitely.
Yeah, that's actually, so you prepared then. You basically prepared for whatever you're going to do.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Fraser, this was so great to talk to you. Amazing work that
Likewise.
you're doing. And I saw you I saw some of your work on LinkedIn, and I just thought this is wonderful that you're doing. But now that I know the story behind it, it's also, for me, so lovely.
That's very kind. I've enjoyed podcasts are quite. So I've never spoken on a podcast like this before. So this is
really
unusual.
Okay.
And I feel like as an interviewee, you talk a lot, and it's you're sort of on a podium speaking, which is a bit of a weird experience. But I very much enjoyed it, and it was nice. It's nice sometimes to just like articulate your own story, because you often don't say it out loud like that. So you realize, even in speaking to you, I realize things about, like, I'm drawing connections in my brain just from speaking. It's like that what I said earlier, right? It's when you're forced to articulate an idea to someone else, it makes you see things that you didn't see before, or uncover things that you weren't aware of previously. So it's been really fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I agree with you. Sometimes when people ask me things, I also think, I haven't thought of that, but yeah, this is why you do it, or so it's great.